Now I would like to invite our speakers is Mr. Hayamai Mahanta. He will give a presentation about social transformation through grassroots inclusive innovation. Mr. Mahanta is currently leading national innovation portal Techpedia at Srishti in India, which has presently more than 0.2 million innovation run by 750,000 university students. I invite Mr. Mahanta to give the presentation.
My colleagues, panel in the audience. A couple of things that I want to cover in my presentation are quite crucial. One thing Professor Omar also told, it shouldn't happen that knowledge should flow only from developed nation to developing nation. It shouldn't happen that the developing nation should always remain a consumer of innovation value chain. What we are trying to propose from our experience, I belong to Honeybee Network in India. You might be knowing Honeybee, as it does in practical life, it cross-pollinates flower to flower. So what we do, we cross-pollinate ideas and innovation from individual to individual, individual to community. And Honeybee also does another crucial thing. When it cross-pollinates the nectar from the flower to flower, it don't keep all the nectar within it. It keeps something with it and also share with others. Similarly, Honeybee Network in India grows up. What it does, it connects individuals, it connects innovators, especially in the informal sectors. When I mean informal sector, let me a little bit clarify. These are not only technology innovations I'm going to talk about only appropriate technology, but we are trying to talk about grassroots innovation in general. And when I mean grassroots innovation in general, the innovations are not necessarily technological innovation. It may be cultural innovation, it may be educational innovation, it may be social innovation, it may be pedagogical innovation. So Honeybee Network, what it does in India, it connects nameless, faceless innovator and traditional knowledge holders and come in contact with the network, if you can look at the logo there, and get an identity. So what it does, it connects innovator who are nameless, who are faceless, and through the process of its systems, the institution that it has developed, it creates an identity for those people. We have created institutions from 1989 till 2000 and afterwards. We have created incubators, we have created societies, we have created ecosystems for it. So let me wander upon a few facts. Why are we talking about a different approach for a common agenda for sustainable development? First of all, many multinational companies now still feel that only that in-house research and development and innovation is not going to suffice them. They're opening up. We're talking about open innovation and all this stuff. We started talking about this thing when we started the philosophy of Honeybee Network 25 years ago, connecting and sharing ideas. Also, we're talking about how do you link informal sector innovators with formal sectors. It's not only the white collar innovators that matters. Even those innovators who are in the schools, who are in the colleges, who are in villages, they significantly contribute to the value chain. Thirdly, when we talk about BOP, bottom of the pyramid, we assume that the people who are economically poor are also intellectually poor, but it's nevertheless, it's not a fact. The people who are economically poor, not necessarily they should be intellectually poor. So how are you going to integrate them in a mainstream of the value chain? And finally, how do you integrate processes of scouting them? They can't come to an incubator, you need to go to them. They can't come to you for valuation, you need to go to them. So what kind of systems that you need to develop? Obviously, for the sustainable ecosystem development, this is the equation that we follow. Technology is like words, it's a small part. Institutions are like grammars, a little bit. And culture is like treasures. You really need to build a culture of innovation from end to end, covering all the stakeholders. So what we propose? When we talk about innovation in formal sectors and other areas, we generally talk about globalization model, west to east and develop to develop. I will take you some case studies, what we have come across in this value chain. We are proposing a new model called grassroots to global. An innovator in a village who has never gone to school, never gone to college, is selling his technology in 40 countries across the world. Absolutely, it can't happen in a developed globalization model. We also propose a model called inverted model of innovation. It has been seen that companies create innovations and then we become a consumer. What we have created a model that has children's ideate, the engineers fabricate, and companies commercialize. I will show you that model. We also have integrated open innovation model for university students, also cultural innovation, education innovations, and crucial thing is the pedagogical innovation, because all the funding mechanism, maybe private equity, venture funding, these are not going to really help innovate in the village or a developing nation at its own sense. This is the process that we follow. This is what I will tell you about the G2G, grassroots to global. This was a guy who was never going to school. He was driving a rickshaw for 6 years in New Delhi, the capital of India. And suddenly he got an accident and he was home, he was jobless. He started trying doing some stuff and he invented a product. He came to our notice, we helped him, we scouted him, we supported him, gave a little bit of small support. And then find a patent. By the way, he got a patent in US, in Europe and all. Now this guy who was never going to school is supplying the innovation to 43 countries. So this guy, in the developing pedagogy, probably will not fit to the critical part of the innovation evolution. And our President of India awards such guys every year in the March in the President's House. So this could be a possibility that that the paradigm can be reversed. Yes, we have converted initiative to institutionalizations. Our former presidents and presidents awards them. This was the model, inverted model I was talking about. We get around 20,000 ideas by school children every year. We convert these ideas to engineering students in the universities as a fabrication, because you can't get thousands of fabricators to help these guys, but India is a country of numbers. We have 2 million engineering students producing every year. We are linking these children's ideas to these guys, and they create these marketable products. And these are the products when they come to market, the student get the reality. The former president of India sits with these kids every year. Also, when these small children innovation are linked to universities, the university student become entrepreneurial. This is a guy talking about a polytechnic college. It's just a high school graduate. He has created a $2 million startup by supporting a small young innovator in his school. These all are possible in the entire grassroots evolution. So that is what I talk about grassroots innovation. I don't only mean about innovation. Also, the President of India, the ministries of different sectors, meet these guys. Also involve the formal sector innovators, because the companies and other stakeholders who have a strong competence in that field brings a lot of value. Yes, we have a repository of 30,000 innovations in the educational sector, the primary school teacher, the secondary school teacher, the kind of innovation that they're doing, the processes, not the technology, processes to improve the access of education quality. Also, we bring in innovation in the cultural capacity, because you can't create only jobs for digging holes and digging funds. You also need to create a market for culturally celebrating innovative people in the villages. This is one model that I told about. We have a special process in which we value on to traditional knowledges and village knowledges. What we do, we collect these knowledges. We have our own people in the network. We don't have own any guy. We connect them to different libraries and different universities and national laboratories. We have created a benefit sharing process. And you know what happens? This is an innovation that I have shown in the slide. Have been contributed by 25 communities of 3 different states. They just gave the idea. We created a validated product out of this. If you see the knowledge sharing in the output, it goes to 30% to the innovator, contingency fund, and women development fund, and natural development fund, and everything else. And these are the products that come out from those innovations. And these products are not marketed by company. The product is named after the innovator itself. So we give a message to the community that we care. This is what the lab is. And we try to integrate innovation, investment, and entrepreneurship in a process to facilitate this thing. So what we have done, the private angel funding and venture funding are not going to help these innovators at the grassroots level. They don't want to a school, they won't go to a college. So what we have designed a micro venture finance fund. It supports without any collateral. You just give in a paper sign and the money is given to it. What we do in developing nations generally, we face a serious problem in the early stage of the funding of the innovation. That is what it fits. Also, we have created a grassroots technology innovation acquisition fund. Why? There's a very simple reason. Country like India, there's an access disparity and disparity. What we need to do is we need to use public fund for acquiring public technology for larger public benefit. So when you find out those innovations, we acquire them through this fund. We make them open source so that those people who can't afford this technology and innovation can access it. So innovation is not only limited to IP bound and conservative fashions, we are also trying to open it. And also we have created a concept called technology common. What we do, when another innovator asks to another grassroots innovator, we give it for free. Because what we believe is, people to people diffusion is not only allowed but also promoted and rewarded. If it is people to farm, it's fine, you can throw licensing and everything else. So what we are trying to propose in this pedagogy is, this matrix you can look at. Most of the companies, if the domain characteristics of the innovation and technological platforms, if you look in a matrix, if the domain characteristics are known and platforms are known, in that case R&D can work out. That's what companies does. If the domain characteristics is known and platform is known, simple incremental adaptive technology can work. If domain characteristics is known and technology platform is unknown, you can go for product development like national mission. But what about the technology in the sustainable pillars areas in grassroots sectors, or those who are not sophisticatedly enabled technology development sector, or the future? That is what is going to happen in the next day's industry. Because affordability and accessibility are the two key factors that corporates are going to face. And they need to learn from the grassroots level. The fourth quadrant is the disruptive systems. Incubators are not going to suffice. Incubators are not going to help everything else. We need to create sanctuary model. We need to create another savannah set of systems in which there is a chaos processes. So what we need to argue in this argument through this process that I want to propose is, these are the tools that I said about. These are the networks that we want to create. These are the mechanisms that the national policy need to look at. And also, the knowledge holders should get a fair share. I think India was the only country in the beginning in 90s where the grassroots innovation movement was a part of the national innovation movement. Because we believe that if you don't reciprocate with the knowledge holder, if you don't give a fair share when you create value out of the knowledge holder, somehow we are not only excluding them, we have no right to talk about the inclusive development in the ecosystems. So what we're doing in this entire exercise is, we are trying to put in different stakeholders like teachers, like culturally celebrated guys, like students, and one thing I wanted to add to Madam, what you talk about the SMEs. In India, in more than 40 lakh SMEs, 4 million SMEs are registered. And these SMEs can never afford a graduate engineer from a college like KAIST or somebody else. And they produce highest jobs, they create an economy, and they can't afford any engineers producing from the country. So how the situation can go up? So we created a model in this system. What we told that India creates 2 million engineering students every year. So what we do, we choose 5 students and connect them for 1 year to one small and medium enterprise. We say that whatever you will do research, whatever thesis you will make, do and help these guys. So we connect them to 1 million small enterprises who in general can't afford an engineer himself, and these guys go and try to help. And this is one of the cases when this guy helped for power surging technology for clusters in Ahmedabad, which is in the western part of this country. So these are the development processes that we are looking at. And yes, so what we have done, we have created a national policy and national innovation foundation. We have created a fund for the children's innovation, because no angel fund is going to work for school kids. We have also created national innovation clubs in every colleges. We have also made a policy recently in the parliament that every member of parliament will support one innovation, and recently that was been transported to the state assemblies also. So India is having more than 600 parliamentarians and more than around 20,000 state assembly guys. If each of them give a message like the president, invite these innovators who used to be a rickshaw puller one day in Delhi are now the invited guests in the presidential house. So if a country can give a message, yes, we care innovation, not only for the formal sectors, but also the informal sector, the semi-privileged sector. I think that gives a lot of motivation. We extended our efforts to African countries, in China, in Asia Pacific, and other regions. It's a voluntary network. We try to collaborate with more and more stakeholders and help. We had a declaration in Tianjin in which we invited stakeholders from Africa, Latin America, Europe, Canada, and others to share whatever we know. By the way, whatever I'm talking, whatever research we do are not copyrighted, even not technology, even not as the tech common. They are all open source. So whatever we learn from these people, we share it open, because we believe we are because of these guys, and that's why we want to take it up. So yes, so Malaysian Innovation Foundation, Innovation Foundation of Indonesia, China, and all have come. And we have tried to look at the perspective how we can help these guys. And yes, so As I told, that this grassroots to global is a model that we have developed. It is just innovators can really migrate out their ideas from one country to other. They can be supported, and also though we support in filing patents, can you believe we have got 685 patents in the name of innovator who are now gone to schools. And if those innovators in those areas could want to compete in the marketplace, they could never compete with the pharmaceutical companies. But now these products in the name of those innovators really compete with the competition, and they don't compete by mercy. They compete by value, they compete by affordability, they compete by frugality, they compete by accessibility. And literally, these are the new things that we want to propose. And this is the piece that I wanted to share with you, that minds on the margin are not the marginal minds. Somehow we have considered that though other stakeholders in innovation evolution are not that much predominant, but we argue that minds on the margin are not marginal minds. We should join hands in learning from grassroots innovators. And really, the question really lies at the top of the innovation of ethical and value pyramid. Thus, poor people are not at the bottom of all pyramid. They may be the bottom of the economical pyramid, but certainly these are not the bottom of every pyramid. So we need to leverage these systems. And absolutely, I think if that is done, the innovations ecosystems could be absolutely inclusive, and it can create more open source communities, more open source values, and more systems which will be more sustainable, because these people, without having knowledge, without having skill, without having resource, if they can create technology, not for a profit, but a global technology, absolutely there is something to be learned. And if the corporates can learn about these things, this thing is going to be creating more possible for sustainable product and services in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Mahanta, for the combination with the presentation of Professor Han and Engineer Mahanta. We have a very good combination of it. Professor Han is bringing the knowledge to the society by bringing appropriate technology, and Engineer Mahanta empowering people to generate the knowledge, generate the technology by themselves to resolve their own problem. I'm really optimistic with grassroots innovation, because this technology developed by people to resolve their own problem at the beginning. It is not for the commercial purpose. And then, if it is commercial, we can do it for commercialization. But in the other side, Professor Hans' approach is distribute the knowledge to improve our system is more and more exciting.
My name is Jane Bonkovic. I'm Professor of Sustainable Development. I come from Serbia. And first of all, I would like to thank you, the organizers, and all the panelists for giving us a very interesting presentation of innovation for sustainable development. I was not really sure about what is going to happen in this session, but finally I am very happy that sustainable development and innovation means many different things for many different nations, obviously, and many different approaches. And it is great to see that all of them are really culturally sensitive. And this is what I think is the most important thing about this session. I was very much impressed by experience from India, and I would like to see many other countries take that approach. But of course, I'm very much aware that it is in Indian culture, and my question would be, do you think that kind of approach is applicable in some other countries which are culturally completely different?
I really enjoyed your talk. One thing which I was very impressed by was the presentation from Mr. Mahanta, integrating the inventions with actually pairing that with engineering students in there. Because I strongly believe that sustainability has to be with industrializing the product. But otherwise, everybody makes something close, you call it a gizmo, and it doesn't really do anything other than just a curiosity. So I think ultimately that has to be industrialized and it has to be foolproof solution, and it has to be mass produced so that it can be affordable. And that would require that there has to be really the business introduced, and the engineering has to be done, mass manufacturing has to be done. That's one of my opinion. And the second opinion here is that the fact that the gentleman from Nigeria, they indicated that you have a lot of plans. Again, when I travel Africa, there are, in middle of desert, there are many, many rusty pumps, showing that there were, once upon a time, people have been trying to help the local community to pump water, and that has been broken down and that nobody is maintaining. I strongly believe that perhaps the sustainability has to be to do with someone making living out of it, fixing, and charges some money for supplying. And I don't know whether it appears that you have those effort there. And the second thing is that you show the agriculture tools that has been probably used for 2,000 years, and nobody seems to be doing anything while they are all looking at other sophisticated things. So I would like to propose that appropriate also begins from those things which farmers use. Farmer doesn't seem to be helped at all because they are completely overlooked, right? So I'd like to congratulate you going and like to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The last question? I would like to panelists to answer the question. Engineer Mahanta?
It's quite interesting question from your side that cultural sensitive issues can affect this pedagogy. I will give you an interesting result that you have experimented. Whatever I'm talking is from past perfect to future indefinite. Based upon the real thing that we have done. We experimented these things in 3 different continents. One in Kenya, in Africa, one in China, and another in Malaysia. Similar processes, little bit of contextually modified. In India, when we started to document and codify grassroots innovation, it took 5 years to document 5,000 innovations. But with a little bit of support, China could make it in 1 year. And in Malaysia, they are on the way, obviously, in a speed better than India, lesser than China. So it may be possible that, sometime like innovation processes in corporates and formal sector, there are codified principles. But in informal sector, there are no codified principles. So if you somehow can codify even a science and arts and philosophy of innovation in informal sectors and others, and try to replicate a different landscape, they adopt it. And they literally do better. In fact, we are trying in Serbia. We have a couple of volunteers. This entire network is a voluntary network. There is no process in this thing. But what we have seen is if given a proper codification of processes, how do you follow, and what are the kind of steps you need to take, it works in different contexts also. And coming to you, sir, I think it has been experiencing a great journey so far as sometimes people in India say that, like Professor told, 1 million engineering students are a liability, not a strength. And that used to be a fact, in fact, because there is a huge Musliming of higher education and 10,000 plus colleges and all these things. In that context, we thought of anyhow these guys are going to work 1 year in research, something or other. If they can do a live research work based upon somebody who can't afford it, I think that means a real integration of engineering. And initially there was a little bit of resistance from the universities, but obviously, when the C results, these things moves on from bottom to top. In fact, the one major thing was the entire approach was a perfect blending of top to down and bottom to up. We believe that in the entire sustainable process, if you only go from bottom to top, it sometimes doesn't work. If you only go from top down in the major policies, it really doesn't work. So how do you blend it harmoniously? That is the real art.